I think October the 7th is probably the most significant event of the 21st century, actually. I think for two reasons. One, the attack on Israel. Obviously, the numbers of people who were killed, slaughtered, Nova Festival. I'm sure a lot of people will know the facts of the event itself, but we often talk about October the 7th as if it's one event. But what people need to realise is it's over 350 young people killed at Nova. It's 90 people killed at a kibbutz, it's 50 people killed at Sderot. So this is multiple pogroms that happen. So you can really understand why, for a lot of people in Israel, it feels like an existential threat. But the other side, which in many ways is more important, I think, and this is the reason we set up our campaign, our fight, is that the West was lacking. The West didn't provide support for Israel. It didn't take the side of Israel. It hasn't looked to try and solve the problem of Hamas. In fact, it's tried to brush Hamas under the carpet. It hasn't looked at trying to solve the problems for Israel of dealing with a terrorist country on its doorstep. Effectively, that's what you've got.
Israel is not only facing an existential crisis, but if Israel gives in and is not able to defend itself effectively, then in many respects, Western civilization itself is called into question.
The West turned its back, and I think that's one of the most shocking, and that's the reason I say it's in many ways the most important event of the 21st century, because it showed that our moral values were lacking. People were not only not reaching out an arm of comfort or comfort for the people of Israel and Jews in the nations that they lived, but some people were even celebrating the events. People in London, for example, were celebrating outside the Israeli embassy, letting off flares and things like that.
The irony is that Arab nationalism overall is in the doldrums, is pretty much defeated, but the West is struggling to relate to the world, and it finds it more difficult to win the votes at the United Nations, and they've accepted that the version of history that the Arab states are promoting, that the Palestinians are peculiarly oppressed people, and that Israel is a peculiarly wicked state, like a settler colonial state. And I think this is a very bad kind of moment in time.
Israel is peculiarly pointed out by the world. It's criticized very extensively compared to its population and size within the globalized world. And we need to understand that one of the toolkits of this is settler colonialism. And it's an abstract idea. Still, many people uses it on the streets, in the media, without knowing the background and the reasoning. And if we really reach to the core of this idea and claim, we see that it's not something that Israel could address through policymaking, through change, but because it questions its very existence.
The theory of settler colonialism argues that once you have a settler colonial society, it's got an inherent tendency to eliminate the indigenous population. So what they call eliminationism, which is really a synonym for genocide, is almost inherent. It's like an original sin of a settler colonial state. And therefore Israel has been called genocidal a long time, even before the current war in Gaza. Israel is called genocidal just because of its very existence. And here we come to some very interesting point. You see, if you take, for example, if you compare Nazi Germany and Israel, Nazi Germany committed the Holocaust. Everybody knows that. There's no debate about it. But the argument is that, okay, they committed the Holocaust, but you can denazify Germany. You can re-educate them so they stop being genocidal and become good Germans. Israel, you cannot do that. If Israel indeed is genocidal, it is genocidal because it's in its very makeup. And therefore, you cannot somehow de-genocide Israel. All you can do is eliminate it. So what you have here is a theory that actually demands the destruction, the elimination of Israel on the grounds that Israel is itself an eliminationary state. It's quite paradoxical.
So what decolonization means nowadays is purging any kind of Western influences, Western values, Western democracies and freedoms. And when they say it's not a metaphor, I mean, they do mean it literally. They mean in the case of Israel, slaughtering Jews, mainly Jews, on October the 7th, 2023, that was hailed by them as decolonization is not a metaphor. It really does mean, in this case, killing Jews.
I see anti-Semitism today as being particularly important because it's not just simply directed against Jews. It becomes a medium through which anti-Western sentiments can be expressed overall. If you read very, very carefully what Jews get criticized for, they basically get criticized for being hyper-white, hyper-Western.
That's why it's really like a religion. It's a subsidy for religion because it's a dogma. They do not try to address criticism, they try to silence it, and that's what we see in the American universities. That's why Israelis are forbidden to enter lecture rooms or even the campuses. That's why they just fancy this type of approach.
It seems at the moment that Israel is doing the world's dirty work, to borrow the expression used by our German Chancellor at the G7 summit. Israel is left at the forefront to fight also an unprecedented wave of Islamism that, unless countered, might consume not only the Middle East, but your beloved West as well.
This is the reason it's so important that we have to roll back on that. We have to make people look it in the eye and make people realise that they took a side with barbarism against civilization.
Unless you wake up and realize that we do have the moral obligation to protect not only Israel, but what Israel stands for. And supposedly, what Israel stands for are your Western values. So you're not doing the Israelis a favor. Fight, help Israel to rescue your own civilization.